Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here, Crimes Told. And today we're going to be discussing the Australian infamous kidnapping case of Graeme Thorne. This case obviously ends in murder, and it's the first infamous case in Australia that involved ransom and overly popularizing basically everything about this case. It was everywhere in the media. His parents were everywhere in the media. I'll get into why. This is a very well-known case in Australia, and it's something that is very interesting for me to kind of learn about because this is a case I never really understood, or not really understood or really looked into. And the more I looked into it, the more of videos I watched that other people have made about it, I was like, whoa, this is weird, this is strange. I've really enjoyed Australian true crime. Like I've mentioned previously, Australia's got some crazy ass crime that happens, and man, it's wild. So let's get into it. And preface my my lovely little notebook with all my notes for this case is down in front of me. So if I look down, it's because I'm referring to it. So Basil and Freda Thorne won the Sydney Opera House lottery. So this lottery was made, and it totaled in the amount of $100,000. And they basically won on June 1st of 1960. So the equivalent to that amount of money as of 2021 is approximately $3.1 million, which is a lot. So this lottery was basically made because the Sydney Opera House was super expensive. So they wanted people to come and, enjoy and all this jazz, and creating the lottery helped with the popularity. Is basically the gist that I've gotten from it. Anybody from Australia that has comments about it, please put it in the comments down below. Parts of that I don't really understand. I understand, but I don't. I know it was super expensive to make the Sydney Opera House. Obviously, I mean, it's in a massive structure. So, but the whole basis of the Opera House lottery is something that's really weird for me. So, once they learned that they won. Once Basil learned they won, everything about them was all over the media. Who they were, where they lived, and their faces, everything personal about them was plastered all over the media. Which brings us to July 7th of 1960. So their son Graeme left for school at about 8:30 a.m. Now, and he went to a local bodega to pick up, I think he was picking up snacks for school. And after he would get out, his mom's friend, Phyllis, would pick him up because she was also bringing her kids to the same school that Graeme went to, which is called Scots College. And when Phyllis got there, Graeme was not there. This concerned her, and she waited, but then she realized, hey, I have to get my kids to Scots College, so she went to the school. So after she arrives at the school, she asks one of the people that work there, hey, did Graeme Thorne arrive? They said no. So obviously she panics, and then she goes back to the Thorne residence. And she tells Freda that she didn't pick up Graeme. Graeme's not at the school. And it's at approximately 9:40 a.m., which is 70 minutes after Graeme left the house, there was a phone call. Now, in between that time, when Freda and Phyllis are there, Freda calls the police, and the police have arrived. So the phone rings and Freda answers. The person on the other end of the phone asks if Mr. Thorne is home. I have your son. She says yes, hands the phone to the sergeant. So the sergeant plays as Basil. Basil is actually a few hours away working at a job site at this time. So obviously he can't be there. So the sergeant decides to pretend to be Basil. That way they can try to get something from this person. So the man on the other end of the phone, he has a European accent, and he asks the sergeant, is this Mr. Thorne? Sergeant says yes, pretends to be Basil, and The guy says, I have your son, or I have your boy. I want $25,000 before 5 p.m. He would proceed to say that if he didn't get the money, then Graeme would be fed to the sharks. The sergeant didn't know that the Thornes had won the lottery, so he just responded with, how would I get this money? And this then prompted the man to say he would call back with instructions at around 5 p.m. and ended the call. So obviously they're going to wait for another call, but another call never comes. Nope. And as expected, the police wait with the Thornes at the house, or with Freda, eventually Basil, at the house, but no call comes in. That's until 9:47 p.m. So 4 hours and 47 minutes later. The man says he wants the money put in 2 paper bags and then hangs up super quick. So during this phone call, it was a different police officer that pretends to be Basil and picks up the phone. And this police officer is trying to get more out of the man that calls, but that man hangs up quickly because the police wanted to try and cross-reference where the phone call was coming from, see if they could find out where it was coming from. But obviously, phone call is cut short. Giving instructions as to where he wanted these bags. And they didn't know. All they knew is that the guy wanted the money split into 2 brown bags, or 2 paper bags. Where do you want them? Huh? Where do you want this money? I don't know. So police also during this time were searching relentlessly, but didn't find anything. Eventually another phone call hadn't come, and this made the Thornes extremely nervous. They just wanted Graeme back. Following a press conference in which Basil actually speaks to the press, and he makes a public statement on behalf of his son and just wants him back. It's after this a tip comes in. The owner of a petrol station, so a gas station in Pennant Hills, said that they saw a dark sedan that evening on July 7th. There was a boy that matched the description of Graeme in the car. He was with 2 men and a woman, and the men one was in their 30s, the other one was in his 20s, and a middle-aged woman. They looked that they were either of Maltese or Italian descent, so from Malta or Italy. When they went to the gas station, they bought a 13-gallon drum, and they filled up the car with gas. This vehicle didn't have a front plate. This car was spotted by police also the following day on July 8th, and then the plates were run once the cop saw the car, like, hey, this is weird, caught the number on the plate, ran it, and noticed that it was a stolen vehicle. There was a high-speed chase, but that car had gotten away. So I want you to know on the 11th of July is when Graeme's school hat was found nearby where he was taken in his school case, which kind of looks like a briefcase, with items from Scott's College was found. They were kind of scattered, but they were discovered. So prior to Graeme's abduction, we're going to go back to the 14th of June of 1960. There's a man that knocks on the Thorne household, and Freda answers. The guy says he's looking for Mr. Bogner, and this is after dinner time. So this man also has a piece of paper in his hands. He looks at Freda, looks down at his hand at the piece of paper, and looks back up at her, and asks if this is the particular number of this house. Freda is stunned and responds with, how did you get this number? It's not listed yet. And he responds with, I have my ways of getting information. So Freda's completely freaked out by him and tells him that if you want to know about a Mr. Bogner, you need to go upstairs and talk to the neighbor Dorothy. So he does, and then he leaves. So this interaction with this man kind of freaks out Freda. So she ends up going upstairs to talk to Dorothy the next day. So Dorothy said that the man that came to the door was looking for Mr. Barley, which is the name of the man that lived in the apartment downstairs where the Thornes were living. And Freda was just like, what? He asked me if there was a Mr. Bogner that lived here. Both of them agreed this man had a thick European accent, and it was just very strange. Also, on the 7th of July, there was a 1955 Ford Custom Line that's seen double parked. So basically, kind of like on the corner of Wellington and Francis Streets. And this was at about 8:20 a.m. near the corner store in which Graeme was last known to go to. Interesting. And he was known to go to that corner store every day before school. So the man that both Freda and Dorothy saw asking for Mr. Bogner and Mr. Barley he was seen a number of times in the area by multiple people, and he was seen in a park that sits opposite of where the Thornes lived. So this man was seen in the area multiple times by multiple people. He went to the house. He talked to the neighbor upstairs. It's all very, very strange. And it would get even more strange because on the 16th of August of 1960, this is when Graeme's body would be found. It was on a Tuesday, and they would be found 6 weeks after he was kidnapped. So his body was about 1.5 kilometers away from where his school bag was found. There was 2 boys that were playing in the area where the discovery was made. So one of the boys' parents was informed at around 7 p.m. The adults saw the body tied. So Graeme's body was wrapped in a blanket. He was wrapped up. So parent sees this body wrapped up and ended up like going over further and saw what it looked like to be hair. And then he called the police. So his body was in a vacant lot 1.5 kilometers away from where his bag was found. And this vacant area was in Grandview Grove. So Basil was called forth immediately to identify this body and to see if it was Graeme. Graeme's body was wrapped in a picnic blanket that had a blue tartan pattern on it. He was gagged with a scarf. He was tied with a string, and his school coat was buttoned all the way up. His body was in an advanced state of decomp. His cause of death was blunt force trauma. Subsequent cause of death was asphyxiation. I always have a hard time saying that word. Asphyxiation. He had abrasions, cuts, and some internal injuries as well. So on the outside of the picnic blanket, they found dog hair and hair consistent with that of Graeme. It was also clear he had been dead for 5 to 6 weeks. So what happened to Graeme? I'm sure you all want to know. So Graeme was basically probably under a ruse, and he was kidnapped by a Hungarian native named Stephen Bradley, which I'll talk about after I talk about this. So Bradley confessed to taking Graeme in his vehicle and drove to Clontarf after wrapping a scarf around Graeme's head and shoving him in the trunk of the car. That evening, apparently when Bradley opened the trunk, Graeme was dead. It's believed that Graeme's head struck a tire iron or a spare tire in the trunk, causing the blunt force trauma to his head. But the coroner believes that Bradley tied the scarf around Graeme's head with a knot on one side, which is how it was found, tied Graeme's hands and feet together like he was bound, and then incapacitated him by hitting him on the head, causing the trauma of the back of the head. And then throwing him in the trunk. He's unconscious, lack of oxygen, possibly if there is no ventilation or proper ventilation. It's sealed off. There's no airflow in there. So he asphyxiated. So it's easy to say that Graeme was killed within 24 hours of him being kidnapped, and then he was dumped soon following his death, or was thought he was dumped soon following his death. But there was fragments on the picnic blanket that showed it was determined, so the fragments were determined to be that of pink limestone. So pink limestone was used as a martyr of foundations. So basically, Graeme was hidden under a house. And he was hidden there for a while. So he's been dead for 5 to 6 weeks. So, yeah. So, Stephen Bradley. Police began to look for a Ford custom line and a house with pink limestone mortar. They end up searching 28 Moore Street following a tip from a postal worker. So this home is in Clontarf, which is where the vehicle that Graeme was seen in went to. This house was actually being occupied by 34-year-old Stephen and his wife, who had recently dyed her hair blonde, and their Pekingese dog, which is they found, dog hair on a picnic blanket. So the police had come to search the home too late because the Bradley family had left for London on the SS Himalaya on September 26th. And the police were searching the home on October 3rd. So they had missed basically their opportunity. The family vacated the home on July 7th, so literally the day of, to live in an apartment at 49 Osborne Street. So when the boat, the SS Himalaya, docked in London, this happened on October 10th, police were waiting for him. And after some waiting time, because they had to wait for extradition from London back to, Australia, he was fully extradited back to Australia on November 18th. So the 19th is when he signed a written confession about the murder of Graeme. His trial started the following year on March 20th of 1961. He pled not guilty, but was found guilty after 9 days of trial. He was sentenced to life in prison. Bradley ended up dying at the age of 42 in jail in 1968. So he wasn't in jail for very long before he died. And he died due to a heart attack while playing tennis. Obviously, this is a very strange kidnapping case because we know who did it. We know partially how he died, kind of. And it's solved. But I still have questions as to what actually happened to him because it's kind of weird. We know he died. We know blunt force trauma and he was asphyxiated. But I want to know how. And the only people that could tell us are dead. So that, my friends, is the kidnapping and murder of Graeme Thorne. This one is a very interesting one that I came across. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in my next video, which is another kidnapping case. But this is an even more bizarre and weird case. So enjoy!